Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister, the Honourable Leader of Opposition, Honourable Cabinet Ministers, Honourable Members of Parliament. I arise this morning to share on the very first participation that I had since taking up office after the 2022 elections at the 67th session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, convened at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Honourable Speaker, the Commission on the Status of Women is a functional commission of the Economic and Social Council and is the principal global intergovernmental body dedicated exclusively to the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of women. The CSW, as it is called for short, is instrumental in promoting women's rights, documenting the reality of women's lives throughout the world, and shaping global standards on gender equality and the empowerment of women, and also plays a leading role in monitoring and reviewing progress and problems in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and in menstruating a gender perspective in the United Nations activities. Honourable Speaker, during the Commission's annual two-week session, representatives of the UN member states, civil society organizations, and UN entities gathered at the UN headquarters in New York to discuss this progress and gaps in the implementation of global women's empowerment and gender equality programs, and also emerging issues that affect women and girls. The member states agree on further actions to accelerate this progress and promote women's empowerment of their rights in political, economic, and social fields. The outcomes of this meeting, Honourable Speaker, and recommendations of each of the sessions are then forwarded to the Economic and Social Council for follow-up. From the 6th to the 17th of March this year, the 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women was convened. Now, every year, Honourable Speaker, there are two themes. The priority theme for this year was on innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And the other theme, which is called the review theme, was on challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of rural women and girls. As the Minister responsible, Honourable Speaker, I led a 7-member government delegation to the CSW. Now, with their own funding support, the delegation included a senior representative of a CSO, a civil society organization, Ms. Nalini Singh, who is the executive director of the Fiji Women's Rights Movement, funded by her own organization. We had a female youth representative, Ms. Bolonga Vindi, who is an ICT entrepreneur, funded by SPC, and also other members who were also funded by their own organizations that we included. The inclusion of the CSO representative, Honourable Speaker, is for the very first time since a lapse of 11 years, Honourable Speaker. The last CSO or civil society representative to be invited by the government was under the former late minister and late speaker, Chikoluveni, who took civil society representative from the Catholic Women's League, Ms. Susanna Evening. And so that was the last time that civil society was invited by government. But coming in this year, Honourable Speaker, I felt this is very important that we work in partnership with our civil society and to take them along on this trip. And of course, a very critical role that they play in advocating for women's empowerment and also the work that they do on grassroots. Honourable Speaker, our youth representative participated in a number of side events as a panelist and spoke on issues that young women face in line with the theme of the CSW, which is on ICT sector. The CSO representative was present during negotiations and was played a very key role in the outcomes of the negotiation team and also the outcomes of the conference. Our ministry fully utilizes opportunities, Honourable Speaker, to participate in high-level bilateral meetings and side events. Not only were we able to secure these bilateral meetings that we requested, but these were outweighed by the number of requests that came from our bilaterals to meet. The bilateral meetings we held were with the United States Special Envoy on Human Rights, Ms. Jessica Stern, the European Union Ambassador, the Canadian Minister for Women and Gender Equality, the Honorable Kirk Humphrey of the country of Barbados, the Executive Director of UN Women, Ms. Sima Bahous. We also met with the, requested, the permanent representatives to the UN for the countries of the US, New Zealand, and Australia. We met with the heads of the UNDP and also UNICEF, as well as the UN Special Representative on Violence Against Children, Ms. Najat Ma'ala, who is visiting Fiji next week. Honorable Speaker, a major highlight of the meetings that were held was the courtesy visit to our United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Safety and Security, our very own Ms. Unaisi Vuniwanga. She's a role model, Honorable Speaker, and a strong inspiration for our Fijian women in the disciplined forces and in Fiji as a whole. Our meeting focused on how we could secure support and learn from states and parties that were successful in implementing activities that were in line with the strategic priorities in our ministry. Honorable Speaker, with support of our crop agencies, namely the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, as well as the Pacific Community, SPC, the Cook Islands, as the chair, requested that Fiji present the statement on behalf of the Pacific Islands. As you know, and members know, Honorable Speaker, the Cook Islands is not a member state of the United Nations, but they were present there, and they chaired all the ministers' roundtables of all the ministers that were present from the Pacific region. But they asked Fiji to present the statement, and it was certainly an honor to do so on behalf of the region. And the focus, of course, was on climate emergency and also the importance of technology as an accessibility tool for quality education, and also on e-commerce and how we can empower our women in the region. Then this was in line with the CSW theme. Honorable Speaker, in my national statement on behalf of our country, not only did I highlight the major initiatives we are currently undertaking in line with the theme, but also the possibility of empowering the lives of Fijian women and girls with the use of technology in e-commerce. Our people are actually connected to the internet, is about 80% are connected to the internet, with about 70% women in Fiji connected to the internet. So, Honorable Speaker, the use of e-commerce for our Fijian women, especially those in the informal sector, that can also look at in the area of agriculture and fisheries and forestry, or wherever women are engaged in e-commerce, both in urban and rural areas. This is something we discussed at length. We also can use technology to improve access to health, access to information, education, but also address gender-based violence, Honorable Speaker, and also women in disaster resilience. Honorable Speaker, what we were forthright about in our statement when we got there in terms of the negotiations, we actually added this to the Pacific region statement, was that, while digital technology and innovation can create new possibilities for climate change, mitigation, and adaptation, it can also expand the carbon footprint of the ICT sector. Honorable Speaker, the ICT sector and artificial intelligence has a huge carbon footprint. And this is something, if we are advancing the rights of our women and girls in this sector, we also got to be mindful of the carbon footprint of the ICT sector. So this was then included in the outcomes because Fiji and then the region endorsed it, pushed for it to be included in the language of the outcomes. Honorable Speaker, I want to highlight here that the immense work undertaken by the region and by Fiji in the negotiations referred to at CSW as the informal discussions, for our input into the agreed conclusions of the 67th session of the Commission. Fiji didn't only speak in our national capacity, but also as the lead negotiator for the region. Again, I do acknowledge my predecessors, and I also acknowledge the previous government in sending our ministers every year for CSW because of the need to report on what Fiji is doing, but also as a leader in the region, as Fiji was the immediate past chair of the region. Honorable Speaker, in being true Pacific Islanders, the team of negotiators were able to negotiate on issues related to carbon footprint, e-waste, and sustainable technology, Honorable Speaker. The inclusion of the climate change cluster in the outcomes document to include a paragraph on the use of technology and innovation to help promote climate change adaptation and mitigation, particularly on the efforts to limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius and ensure conservation and sustainable oceans management and the protection of diversity. In response to the negotiations to remove the language on maritime areas from the document, the negotiation team was able to retain this because it wanted to remove the reference of the words maritime areas. But the negotiation team was able to retain this and also included the language on islands to make specific reference to our region. Honorable Speaker, a very important part of the conference or the meeting was the discussion of technology-based or technology-facilitated violence. Technology-facilitated violence. And Honorable Speaker, it's known as online violence. And I wanted to share some statistics on this. 2/3 of Fijians of all races have access to the internet, and the number of mobile phones is equivalent to 139% of the population. It is widely recognized that the incidence of online discrimination, harassment, threats, and exploitation is surging around the world, and it has serious direct consequences for many of its victims. Fijian adolescents are at heightened risk of online exploitation. In Fiji, more than 6 in 10 adolescents, 61%, are found to have low to very low levels of media literacy. That is, the ability to discern and deal with online threats, manipulation, or misinformation. The wide availability of online pornography that can be downloaded, saved, reviewed, and retransmitted on mobile phones appears to be a factor exacerbating sexual abuse that is perpetrated not just by adult men, but also by teenage boys. Revenge pornography that occurs when men or boys post sexually explicit images of women or girls online without their permission, especially in situations where couples break up after a romantic relationship, has also been seen in Fiji. It has led to women and girls being stigmatized by their families and communities with emotional consequences that can last for years. Sexting and cyberbullying are also occurring in Fiji schools, and we really need to educate both girls and boys on the consequences of such actions. A recent research, Honorable Speaker, investigated attacks on Fijian politicians for their political beliefs, views, and affiliations. Online comments were directed at male politicians 4 times more often than female politicians. However, Honorable Speaker, 83% of the comments directed at female politicians were sexist or misogynist in nature. While there are several issues pertaining to gender-based violence have found a home with digital and technological facilities, mainstream media and digital technologies also provide critical violence against women prevention settings, and at the same time they can be vehicles that perpetuate and aggravate violence against women. So it is a catch-22, and it's something that we as a government or as parliament or as legislators need to look at our legislation and look at our Online Safety Commission and whether it really has teeth when it comes to addressing online violence, and especially this huge percentage of comments directed at women and girls. To conclude, Honourable Speaker, I must acknowledge the government in its support to ensure that Fiji was represented at CSW. It was something that I literally came upon in the first few weeks that I had to prepare for, and I can assure you, Honourable Leader of Opposition, it was not a waste of taxpayers' money. It was certainly a continuation of the previous government's commitment, and we will continue to do so in terms of our presence at CSW to report on the status of Fijian women. I also acknowledge the governments of Australia through the SPC that supported Fiji's chief negotiator, which was our director for women, and our youth representative to CSW. I also acknowledge the chair of the Pacific Islands Forum, Cook Islands, and their representative that was in New York to support the region and for giving the honor for Fiji to present the region's statement. I also acknowledge the support of PIFS and SPC Secretariat. They had their Secretariat support on the ground to assist myself as well as our chief negotiator throughout the participation at the Commission on the Status of Women. I am also very grateful to all the women and girls of Fiji for their support, and of course, Honourable Speaker, we have a big challenge in front of us. I shared about the statistics on violence against women and girls yesterday as part of a question, and the trends on domestic violence. Online violence, which was addressed at this particular meeting, is a big problem that we need to deal with as legislators, and it is upon us to protect our women and girls, to protect our most vulnerable because of this growing threat, because of our presence online. I thank you, Honourable Speaker.